AEW.com live recap of AEW Dynamite for September the 22nd, 2021. A history-making edition of Dynamite in New York City, Queens, New York at Arthur Ashe Stadium. 20,000 plus fans in attendance. The biggest crowd in the history of AEW up to this point. The biggest non-WWE crowd in the United States since July of 1999, when WCW was at the Georgia Dome. They did around 25,000 people. Very big night for AEW. Let's get right to it because we started off hot. I was a little surprised. We opened Dynamite with Bryan Danielson versus Kenny Omega. The match we thought was going to close the show, opened the show. Now, I do like this for two reasons. One, as we saw, the women got to main event. Britt Baker and Ruby Soho went on last. Women get a chance to close the show. That's always a cool thing. And the second reason I like it is because if you started Danielson versus Omega, say 9:20, 9:25, 9:30, around that time, then it would pretty much give away that it's going to the time limit. And there was a 30-minute time limit. So when you open the show, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be 30 minutes. It could go 15 minutes. It could go 20. But they could basically go on and you're not thinking for sure that it's going to be a time limit draw. Now, with that being said, early in the match, I was thinking it would be a time limit draw. But let's start at the beginning here. We had Daniel Bryan, and I got to stop saying that, Bryan Danielson. I've been using his, as Jeff Meacham would say, his slave name for the past decade. Bryan Danielson came out first. Massive reaction for him. Crowd booed Omega. And as soon as these guys got in the ring and the bell rang, the place just erupted. It reminded me of when Hulk Hogan faced Bill Goldberg at the Georgia Dome and the fans popped huge just for the bell ringing. So that's when you know you're in for a real treat. The crowd was just off the hook for this match. And like I said, it started off really slow with a lot of feeling out, and these guys were just milking it. You know, Bryan hit one kick, and then Omega would come in with a chop. Crowd still doing the woo, by the way. But, you know, they were working slow, building it up, and you knew they were going the 30 minutes at this point. Like, to me, there was no question that they were going to be stretching this match out for 30 minutes. Which, if there's any criticism, it's that it was kind of obvious, at least to me, that they were going 30 minutes. And I'm not the biggest fan of 30-minute time limit draws or 60-minute time limit draws. I've never been a big fan of that, and it's something going back to the NWA. They did it a lot with the draws, and old school wrestling fans like that stuff, but I was never the biggest fan of that. I will say that we do not see it that often, so to have it happen every now and then is fine, not a big deal. Walter Cruz sent in a $5 super chat, says, it makes sense if you're going on to do that type of ending to start with them. Absolutely. So let's talk about the match. Omega got the upper hand for a while, and Bryan eventually made a comeback, did his signature moves that he's been doing in WWE, and Omega then recovered from that, hit a dive over the top rope. Crowd started chanting, "This is awesome." And it was 15 minutes in before we even got our first near fall. And they ended up fighting on the ramp, and Bryan was doing the knees. By the way, one thing I really liked when Bryan was doing the yes kicks, he'd alternate between the yes kicks and the chops. So the crowd would go, yes, woo, yes, woo. You know, that was really cool. Although, again, if people are trying to cancel Ric Flair, you got to stop doing the woo. But that's probably not going to happen. Anyways, they were on the stage, and Bryan missed one of the kicks, and Omega hit one of those snap tiger suplexes on the ramp, and Bryan was in trouble at this point. They were back in the ring. Crowd gave them a standing ovation, chanting AEW. Omega hit an avalanche tiger suplex, but Bryan kicked out of that. And Bryan took a great bump here because, people would expect that type of suplex, somebody to land on the back of their head or their neck. And Bryan just completely flipped over, landing face first, protecting his neck. Total pro right there. He took that bump perfectly, in my opinion. And Bryan countered the one-winged angel, and he hit a reverse Hurricane Rana. That looked really cool. Omega countered the running knee, hit the V-trigger, but Bryan kicked out of that. And then Omega went for a Phoenix Splash, but he missed. The two of them started trading blows. Bryan got the best of him, took him down with a kick, and then put on the label lock, but Omega got to the rope. And then we were down to about a minute left in the match, and they were trading blows back and forth, and the time ran out. They didn't try to do one of those finishes where somebody's going for a pin and the time runs out. They were just fighting, and the time ran out. And right when the bell rang, Bryan got the label lock on again, but then the Elite ran down, the Super Click. Adam Cole was down there. And you had the Bucks super kicking Bryan. This led to Christian, Jungle Boy, Luchasaurus running down to make the save. And that, of course, sets up the match on Friday on Rampage, which they're actually taping right now as we speak in Queens. Gary says the draw made it much more unpredictable with an obvious winner. Plus, it protects both men. This match was purely phenomenal. I'm stoked to see another match with these guys down the road. And that's really the key. If this match leads to people wanting to see them fight again on pay-per-view, then this was the right call to do the 30-minute time limit draw. Now, if you're a new viewer of AEW and you're watching this and it's a time limit draw, does it hook you? Do you want to see a rematch? Or do you feel like, well, I just watched something for 30 minutes and there was no decisive victor, and you kind of lose interest? So that's the big question here. Like, is it going to create more interest for a rematch between these guys on pay-per-view? I was kind of hoping to see Omega win clean, just because he hasn't really won a lot of matches clean as champion. I'm not sure if he's won any significant matches clean since winning the title. And do a storyline maybe where Bryan loses and then has to start from the bottom and work his way up the ladder to get another match with Omega. They could have done that, but this was all about showing off what these guys could do, perhaps to a new audience. We'll have to see what the numbers are. And this is right up there. Like, I'm saying it might have even topped Edge versus Seth Rollins for the TV match of the year. Like, it's neck and neck for me. Edge and Rollins was great, but the crowd heat for this one was just so unbelievable. And these guys just tore it up, of course. Tony H with a $5 super chat says, this was how you book long-term stories. Danielson versus Omega 30 minutes isn't enough, and they'll give you the intrigue to do this again. 4.5 out of 5 stars. Well, there you go. That's from Tony H. Thank you for that. Curtis Butler says you wanted Bryan to lose on the first try. I would not have objected to that, and this is fine too. Doing the time limit draw is fine, as long as they're not doing it all the time. And yeah, maybe they set up an hour Iron Man match on pay-per-view. They could absolutely do that, and I think people would be really intrigued by that. So we'll see what the numbers are, but I think they're going to do really good. I don't know if they're going to break the record from the first episode of Dynamite, but I think they're going to come close, because this felt like a really big deal. And if you were tuning in, I could see people staying for the duration of the match. And then you followed that up with CM Punk. So you would think that CM Punk being out there right after that would keep the momentum going. That, of course, leads into CM Punk. And Marshall Leonard says the last draw in a championship match was Judgment Day 2000, Rock versus Triple H. I thought Triple H actually won that one. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. And Adam says, hi, I'm a new subscriber. Well, thank you, Adam, for tuning in. I very much appreciate it. Let's see. We had CM Punk come to the ring for a promo to hype up his Rampage match against Powerhouse Hobbs. And he said what we're all thinking. How do you follow that first match? And the answer is you don't. And CM Punk just went out there and said that. And said he's glad he's not wrestling. Well, of course, he's wrestling probably right now as we're speaking, or at some point over this next hour. 2 hours, I should say, because they're taping 2 hours for Friday. That's going to be a lot of content for Friday night. I'm still debating if I'm going to recap Rampage along with SmackDown and do something at midnight. What do you guys think? Should I just do SmackDown or should I do Rampage as well? Let me know in the chat room and leave a comment on YouTube if I should do both of them this week, even though the spoilers will be out for Rampage. So anyways, CM Punk, of course, had to take a little subtle jab at WWE, saying it's been a long time since pro wrestling has been in New York City. And real quick here, Fluffy PR says, my sister actually watched AEW for the first time with me, and she loved the Bryan and Omega match until the finish, and she was confused, and when I tried explaining to her, she tuned out for the rest of the show. Very interesting comment, Fluffy. Thank you for that insight. I do appreciate it. People are saying I should do both, so maybe I will do both depending on what the results are for Rampage and if I feel it's something I should absolutely talk about on a live stream. Walter Cruz with a $2 super chat says, do both. Most of us stay up for Jeff anyways. Well, thank you for that, Walter. I do appreciate it. CM Punk said that people were talking about how he should be angry and he needs to be the old CM Punk again. And he said, eventually you will see him angry, but you have to be careful what you wish for. He said that, yes, he is mad about being put through a table by Team Taz, but then when he walked out in front of the crowd, that emotion, that feeling, all of the anger went away. And he said that nobody is going to take this passion he has away from him again. He said Team Taz did make a mistake to let him live, basically. And he said that Powerhouse Hobbs will be going to sleep this Friday on Rampage. And Paid Enthusiast says, I think Danielson and Omega's feud will end up being like The Rock and Triple H's, with the exception that both Danielson and Omega are far better in-ring performers. Well, what do you mean better in-ring performers? In what regard? Like, just their work rate? I mean, The Rock and Triple H were not the flashiest wrestlers, but they could get 60, 70,000 people invested in them, and they put on some great performances. So it's not all work rate, but if you're just judging it based on work rate, then yeah, maybe Danielson and Omega are above The Rock and Triple H. But you know, there's different ways to have a great match besides just the athleticism. And Dylan Hensley with a $5 super chat, thank you, Dylan, says, I like that Bryan and Punk are getting two different pushes. Bryan gets hot-shotted and Punk is starting from the bottom to work his way up. Makes sense to me. Yeah, and especially since Bryan was fresh off of being at WrestleMania. Punk has been out for 7 years. So it does make sense with Punk. I know some people are like, Punk needs to be in the mix, and he'll get there. They're definitely going to do those big Punk matches, but in a way, it does make sense because Punk was gone for so long. You know, he's got to fight off the ring rust and show everybody that he's still as good as he was. With Bryan, everybody knows he was in the main event of WrestleMania. So, you know, the guy 2021 was headlining WrestleMania, and he fought Roman Reigns in his last WWE match. So everybody knows he's a contender. But with Punk, he's got to show everybody that he's still a contender. Anyways, moving on here, we had MJF versus Bryan Pillman Jr. Pillman had Julia Hart out there with him. MJF went for a handshake, and Pillman had none of it. He went right after MJF. MJF was trying his various tactics. He pulled Julia Hart in front of him, took a cheap shot at Pillman, but then Julia pie-faced MJF, and Pillman took advantage, got the upper hand. Pillman was coming off the top, but then MJF caught him, put on the Salt of the Earth submission, and young Pillman Jr. submitted. This was good. I mentioned this last week. I would have liked to have seen an upset victory just for a special moment on this Dynamite show in New York, and something that could really put Pillman on the map, kind of like a 1-2-3 Kid Razor Ramon type deal where the underdog pulls off the upset victory. And we really haven't seen a whole lot of that in AEW. Typically, the more established guy wins, and we rarely see the upsets. I would have liked to have seen an upset here, but it is what it is. MJF picks up the win, and the match was still fine, and I'm sure Pillman will get his moment at some point, but yeah, I would have liked to have seen Pillman pick up an upset victory over MJF. Just surprise roll-up or something like that. We had a little promo from Jericho and Jake Hager to hype up the match on Friday, and he said that Hager said that the men of the year are the boys of the week. Called Dan Lambert a fat-faced dipshit. Yeah. I think that might have been a Brody Lee reference, maybe. And Jericho said that they're ready to snack on some MMA meatheads. Marcus the Entertainer says MJF should not be losing. And perhaps you're right. It's just I felt like this could have been a breakout moment for Pillman. I don't think MJF would have been really hurt if he lost one match, especially if it was like a roll-up or something like that. Just for that, big moment in New York that would be talked about for years, perhaps. Instead, MJF just wins. People will more or less forget about this match in a couple of weeks. That's my thought process on it. Next up, we had Malakai Black versus Cody Rhodes. And Cody made a big entrance, had a superhero outfit with a cape. Brandy Rhodes made her return after giving birth not too long ago. They got their show premiering next week. I think it's next week. Cody was getting booed out of the building. Like, they did not like him. And I was asked on Twitter, why was Cody being booed? I think it's maybe a couple of factors. One being that Cody's the EVP, and maybe he's getting a little bit of that John Cena heat where people are starting to resent him because he's the boss and he's always protected. And the other thing is, I think people just really love Malakai Black, and they're really rooting for the guy. He got cut by WWE for really no good reason, and he's doing really well. He has a badass entrance. I think people they wanted to see Malakai Black win this match, and that's the bottom line. MVP Kev says Jeff Jarrett syndrome when it comes to Cody. Yeah, you may be right. And Joey says Cody will turn heel soon enough. Well, Cody said he's not turning heel, and Cody has made it clear he's like a shade of gray. He just goes out there, he's Cody. If people boo him, that's fine. If people cheer him, that's fine. He just goes out there, does his thing, and he lets the people decide if he's a good guy or a bad guy. That's pretty much his attitude. Anyways, we had this match where Black was taking care of business, and he did his springboard backflip into that sitting position. Brandy got in the ring, sat down next to him, and flipped him off, which got a ton of boos from the crowd. Cody tried to take advantage of that, but Black kept at him, and Cody almost got counted out at one point. Cody was able to make a comeback, but was getting booed again by the crowd. He hit a Cody cutter. He hit the crossroads. Black kicked out of that. And then Arn got on the apron. And Cody ended up being sent into Arn accidentally. Cody went to the outside to check on Arn. Arn told him to get his ass back in the ring. So Cody did. Cody got Black in the corner. And Cody, I guess he was just so caught up in the moment. He struck the referee, which was not a DQ, interestingly enough. Maybe the referee felt it was an accident. The referee got knocked by Cody, and when the referee wasn't looking, Black spitted out some mist and then pinned Cody with an inside cradle. And Black, this time, not a decisive win, but he did sneak by with a win. He did pick up another win over Cody. And I guess that this feud will continue, maybe a third and final match between them. Tony H with the $2 super chat says, Cody made it about Cody, so dumb. And Walter Cruz says, Cody is the MVP, but he does put people over. He does, and he's done his share of putting over other people. And I think people were, you got to keep in mind, last year, Cody put over Brody Lee, but then he came back and beat Brody Lee. And I think maybe some fans were thinking it was going to be that whole scenario all over again, where Cody gets his win back, and maybe that's why they were booing him so heavily. I'm thinking that was the case here. So yeah, Malakai Black picks up the win. Not a decisive win this time, so we'll probably get one more match between these guys. Tony H says Black should be way more dominant than what he was, in my opinion. I would not have minded another Black win, like more dominant, but then where do you go with Cody? I guess you gotta have Cody save face a little bit so he can come back and do one more match with Black, or move on and feud with somebody else and lose gracefully, I guess, instead of just being slaughtered by Malakai Black. But the crowd just loves Black, and Black is doing some great stuff. His entrance, one of the best entrances in wrestling right now, in my opinion. Next up, we had FTR up against Sting and Darby Allin. FTR, they changed their music, so now their music is like kind of a remix of the WCW Four Horsemen song, and they came down to the ring with NWO tribute gear, similar to the New Day, but the New Day is doing more of a tribute to the Wolfpack with the red and black. FTR doing the old school NWO black and white FTR NWO style lettering. So it's kind of cool that you got two teams on two different shows, two different brands, paying tribute to the NWO at the same time. Dylan Hensley with a $5 super chat says, and a bunch of people thought that Cody was actually going to bury Black. Trust the process, guys. AEW 9 times out of 10 delivers the right result. Good point there, but you never know. And people were perhaps thinking of last year and thinking it was going to be a repeat. I was thinking they were going to have Black win with some kind of shenanigans, and ultimately that's what happened. Oh, yeah, and I forgot. So thank you, Oscar, for reminding me. He sent in $5. Thank you for that. He says, are we going to ignore that Arn fell down before his spot? Yeah, I actually forgot about that. I didn't even put it in my notes. So thank you for reminding me. He did fall down and then got back on the apron, and then Cody accidentally knocked into him. So anyways, FTR versus Sting and Darby. Sting was on fire. Sting did a lot in this match. You know, a guy who's 62 years old. He looked really good in this, you know, all things considered. And even Pat McAfee had to tweet about it. He tweeted Sting's age on Wikipedia or whatever the site is that lists the age. Maybe it was just Google. But yeah, Pat McAfee was definitely impressed, as was I. Sting was taking out FTR with some slams, and then Dax saved Cash from the Stinger Splash. Darby tagged in, went to the top. He was going to do a coffin drop to both FTR members on the outside, but they caught him and slammed him into the apron. And Sting came back in, saved Darby from a pile driver. They were going to try to do the spiked pile driver, but Sting brought an end to that. And then Sting had a second wind. He did a double Stinger splash, hit the death drop to Cash. But then when Sting was going after Cash, Tully Blanchard, who was on the outside, he grabbed the steel chair, put it behind Dax. So when Sting was coming for the Stinger splash, Dax would move and Sting would hit the chair, but Sting caught it just in time and the whole plot backfired. And then Sting put on the Scorpion Deathlock to Dax. Cash tried to make the save, but got hit with the coffin drop by Darby, and Dax tapped out. Fun match here, and like I said, Sting looked really good for a 62-year-old, I have to say, and, you know, the Sting and Darby team, very entertaining stuff. I enjoyed this match a lot. We had some clips shown from the Ruby Soho and Britt Baker promo exchange last Friday, where they were taking some shots at each other. Ruby bringing up how Britt is banging guys in the back, and then Britt responded by saying Ruby got fired. She's not a runaway. She got canned. And Ruby said, yeah, that's true, but it was the best thing to ever happen to her. We had a main event match, the women getting the main event spot. I approve. And, you know, definitely a good decision to put Bryan and Omega on first and let the ladies close. We got the dueling chants for both of them. Good main event here. Back and forth match between the two of them. Ruby was able to counter the stop from Baker and put on a single leg crab. Then she went up to the top, hit a senton, but Britt kicked out of that. Britt then recovered, hit the avalanche raid crash, but Ruby kicked out of that. And then Britt finally got the stomp on. However, Ruby once again kicked out. Ruby did a roll-up, which is kind of funny because the roll-up is a finish for so many WWE matches. Britt kicked out of that because it's not WWE. And then we had the interference, Rebel and Jamie Hayter getting on the apron. Jamie attacked Ruby when the referee was busy with Rebel. And then Britt picked up the win by submission with the lockjaw. So solid main event here. I was almost thinking when they announced this match for last, I was wondering, are they going to do like a big feel-good moment to close out the show and have Ruby pull off the win? I was not expecting her to get the title. I still think that the eventual build is Britt Baker versus Thunder Rosa for the title. But yeah, they did have Britt Baker retain the title. So they didn't go with any kind of big feel-good moment to end the show, but you do have Rampage, which is on Friday, kind of a continuation of Dynamite. You know, they're, like I said, taping it as we speak. So Britt Baker picks up the win, continues to build up momentum as champion. And to me, the real money match right now is Thunder Rosa versus Britt Baker for the title on pay-per-view, since they did it on Dynamite. And if anybody's going to beat Britt for the title, I think it should be Thunder Rosa. But I would not have objected to a feel-good title change, but you know what? They decided to not hot-shot it, stick with the plan, and this was good. So overall, great Dynamite. I mean, one of the best Dynamites they've produced, for sure. The first match, arguably the TV match of the year. I would probably say it is the TV match of the year. And we'll see what the numbers are. I give the show a solid A. I'm going just short of an A+, but damn great Dynamite. Absolutely worth checking out. And if you watch this Dynamite and you're not hooked on it, then AEW is not for you. You're not going to get into it. But perhaps there will be some people on the fence that will watch this show and they'll be like, yeah, these guys put on some great stuff. And maybe AEW will get some new fans out of this. Time will tell. Seeing some A pluses from a lot of people. Marshall, Gary, Terry all give it A multiple pluses. Dylan with an A plus. Walter with an A. CC Drink, who is more into WWE, gave it a B. Marcus the Entertainer with an A. MVP Kev with an A minus. And Don and Arco given an A as well. Curtis Butler and Mike B with an A minus. So let me see the poll here. So clearly an A. 77% A for Dynamite, 20% B, 0% C, and 3% D. That's probably, since I started doing the polls in here, that's been the best result I've seen for a show. So yeah, if you did not watch it, if you're just checking out my review to get my thoughts first, I would say watch it from start to finish and see if it hooks you or not. If there's ever a show to watch to maybe become a fan of it, this is clearly the one. So thank you guys for tuning in. I appreciate it. Coming up next on the agenda, we got the No DQ review. That'll be interesting to get some more thoughts on AEW. And make sure you guys stay tuned to NoDQ.com. If you're interested in spoilers, we'll have them up as soon as possible. And sorry, Joey, but gotta spoil Rampage. Been doing it since 1998. We spoil wrestling, and people don't like it, but it's part of the job. And stay tuned to NoDQ.com for the latest regarding the fallout from this. We'll see what the numbers are. That's going to be interesting. Take care, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I will see you all next time.